Welcome. In our world today, so many people are looking for something more, right? A real sense of meaning that goes beyond just the day-to-day grind. Today, we're going to dive into how a fascinating group of thinkers, the existentialists, wrestled with this exact search. Their ideas, born from a century of crisis, actually give us a powerful language to understand the human heart. And as we're about to see, they have some surprising relevance for Christian ministry today. So let's start with a feeling that I think kicks this whole journey off. Yeah, this question, it really hits home, doesn't it? That feeling of being stuck on a treadmill, just going through the motions, feeling like your life isn't really your own. This isn't just a modern complaint. It's the exact starting point for the whole philosophical journey we're about to take. It's the problem these thinkers were desperate to solve. So, where does our story begin? Well, not with the most famous existentialists you might be thinking of. It actually starts with a foundational philosopher who completely changed the rules of the game. Before we can even get to guys like Heidegger, we have to understand the man who insisted that if you really want to study humanity, you can't start with abstract theories. You have to start with the messy, beautiful, complicated reality of life itself. Okay, this slide has a big German word on it, but don't worry, the idea behind it is actually pretty straightforward. Geisteswissenschaften. It basically means the human sciences. And Wilhelm Dilthey's argument was a game changer. He said, look, you just can't study people, our cultures, our faith, our history, the same way you study rocks or chemicals in a lab. To understand the human spirit, you have to begin with the richness of actual lived experience. So as you can see here, Dilthey's contribution was huge. He said we are historical beings, totally shaped by our past. He taught that meaning isn't some fixed thing, but something that unfolds over time. And I love this. He said that to truly understand another person is a rediscovery of the I and the thou. He put hermeneutics, the art of interpretation, right at the center of everything. And without these ideas, the existentialist who came after him would have had no ground to stand on. This whole framework became the launchpad for his most famous student. And wow, did his student run with it. That student was Martin Heidegger. In 1927, he published a book called Being and Time, and it was like a philosophical supernova. It went back to the biggest, oldest question of all. What does it even mean to be? But here's the twist. To answer it, Heidegger focused his entire analysis on the one and only being who can even ask that question in the first place, us, the human being. So to do this, Heidegger came up with a special term for us, Dasein. It literally translates to being there. And this is key. It's not about some static human nature. For Heidegger, our existence is a dynamic process. We are always already there, in the world, tangled up with it. And our very being is defined by our possibilities and our constant search for meaning. A huge part of being Dasein is what Heidegger called thrownness. I mean, just think about it for a second. None of us chose to be born, right? We were just thrown into a particular time, a particular place, a particular family and culture. We are, as one writer so memorably put it, trapped in a world we never made. This isn't him complaining. It's just the fundamental starting condition for every single one of us.
Now this next one, this should really ring a bell for us as theological students. Heidegger says our default state, the way we normally exist, is fallenness. It's an incredible philosophical parallel to the theological concept of the fall. He says we get absorbed into the world, preoccupied with the daily grind, that rat race, and we're totally governed by the anonymous opinions of the they, the crowd. And when we're in that state, we completely forget the most important question of all, the question of our own being.
And listen to how Heidegger himself puts it. It's so vivid. He says, fallenness isn't just a passive state of forgetting. He calls it an active fleeing in the face of itself. It means we are actively running away from the awesome weight and the incredible possibility of our own existence. We're distracting ourselves with all the noise of the world. Okay, so if that's the problem, how do you get out? What's the path back to an authentic life? Well, according to Heidegger, it's not easy. It starts with a crisis, a moment of deep dread, or what he calls angst. This isn't being afraid of something specific. It's a profound anxiety that just shatters our daily routines. But in that moment of clarity, our true self is revealed as care, and real authenticity is finally found by courageously facing our ultimate possibility, our own finitude, our own death. Heidegger's philosophy is incredibly powerful for diagnosing the human condition. But, and this is a big but, we just can't understand the man or his later thinking without confronting a very dark and deeply troubling period in his own life. We have to talk about his personal, political, and moral failure.
The historical record is just clear. Heidegger willingly and enthusiastically embraced the Nazi movement. He thought he could be its philosophical guide. He used his prominent position as rector of a major university to promote its ideology before he eventually became disgusted with its crude reality and resigned. This involvement, of course, led to him being suspended from teaching after the war. And he can't separate this absolute moral and historical disaster from what happened next in his philosophy. This catastrophic entanglement with evil changed his thinking profoundly. He basically retreated from politics and society and became much more pessimistic. This shift is known as the turn, and it led him to focus more on things like language, poetry, and a more mystical sense of being, because he came to believe that traditional philosophy itself was part of the problem. So Heidegger's path to authenticity is this intense, lonely journey. It's the individual confronting their own mortality all by themselves. But thankfully, that's not the only option on offer. Two other brilliant German thinkers writing at the very same time gave us powerful alternatives that are rooted not in solitude, but in relationship and in faith. And this chart just lays out the contrast so clearly, right? For Heidegger, it's all about facing death alone. But for Martin Buber, real life is found in a genuine personal encounter. And for Karl Jaspers, it's about finding faith precisely when life pushes us to our absolute limits. Martin Buber gives us this just beautiful and profound distinction. He says most of our life is spent in the I-it world. That's where we treat people and even things as objects to be used, managed, or analyzed. It's the world of transactions. But true life, Buber says, happens in the I-you encounter, a real, direct relationship where we meet another person not as an object, but as a whole person. And for Buber, every single I-you relationship is a small glimpse of our ultimate relationship with God, who he calls the eternal you. And that brings us to Karl Jaspers. He focuses on what he calls limit situations. These are those moments that just shatter our routines and our sense of control, a profound loss, a serious illness, a guilt we can't escape. Jaspers argues that it's in these very moments of crisis, when our own power completely fails us, that we're forced to confront the ultimate questions and reach out for what he calls the transcendent, what we would call God. Okay, that was a lot of philosophy, right? So let's bring it right back down to the ground. What in the world does any of this, forged in 20th century Europe, have to do with equipping us for ministry right here, right now? Well, first things first, we've got to be critical here. Heidegger, for instance, was pretty dismissive of faith. He felt that believing in God was basically a way of avoiding the hard, scary work of real philosophical questioning. But as the source text argues, he's just wrong about that. Theology isn't about having all the easy answers. It is its own profound way of thinking about the deepest questions of God and being. Now, this is really the payoff slide, isn't it? This is where we see how all these abstract ideas become real tools for ministry. Heidegger's idea of fallenness gives us a language to preach against a superficial cultural Christianity, a spiritual rat race, and to call people to a truly authentic faith. Buber's I-you challenges us to build genuine communities, not just run efficient programs. And Jasper's limit situations equip us for pastoral care, reminding us that it's often in those moments of crisis and suffering that God does his deepest work in us. So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway? It's this. These thinkers, Heidegger, Buber, Jaspers, for all their flaws, they provide us with invaluable tools. They help us diagnose the restlessness and the anxiety of our time. They give us a vocabulary to speak to that deep human hunger for a life that is not just busy, but meaningful, not just full of transactions, but rich with real, genuine connection. And so that leaves us with a challenge. A question for all of us as we prepare to lead. In a world that prizes efficiency and results, how do we intentionally build churches that are spaces for genuine I-you encounters with each other and with the living God, instead of just managing another I-it organization? That is the existential challenge for the church today.